Hi, friends. Hi, friends. Welcome to today's lesson from the 18th chapter of the Gospel of John. Today, we're going to look at how Jesus has been arrested. He has endured an illegal trial through the night at the hands of the high priest and the Sanhedrin. Peter has denied him. And friends, can I just take a minute to touch on that? Because sometimes when we have significant moral failures, they can really defeat us from moving forward. Listen, Jesus knew from the start Peter was going to deny him. He knew Peter was going to fail him. No matter how much Peter said, "No, I am for you." And the thing is, it broke Peter's heart. May we just take a lesson from him on this. And that was, Peter simply went and repented to Jesus. And he received Jesus's forgiveness. And look, the end of the Gospel of John, chapter 21, Jesus is making Peter breakfast on the beach. He's not only restoring him, but he's like, "Peter, I have things for you to do. I want you to be doing this, this, and this for my kingdom." So friend, let us not allow failures to have the last word in our lives. Let us receive Jesus's forgiveness. He covers that with his blood, and let us move forward with him. Okay, that's not my lesson. It's just a side note, but I don't want us stuck in anything, no matter how grievous or ugly it can look. Okay, so moving on. So Peter is brought now. The high priest and Sanhedrin bring him to the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, and this would have been now the trial through the night was illegal, but this part is the part that would have been per procedure of the day. The Romans did their business very early in the morning, and they were actually done by like noon, give or take. And so they bring him to Pontius Pilate. The interesting thing is they don't want to defile themselves by going into a Gentile's house. So they have Pilate bring Jesus out. They're setting up an innocent man for murder, but somehow defiling themselves in this Gentile home seemed a little too much for them. The hypocrisy is staggering, okay? So let's start with Jesus's interrogation by Pilate, and that was one of Pilate's administrative duties, was to interrogate criminals who Israel felt needed to come before the governor. Okay, it says this in verse 29. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Pilate said, oh, I'm so sorry. Verse 30. If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you. Now, here, let me take a minute to talk about this because actually, let me read you this last verse. But we have no right to execute anyone, they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. So Roman law, the Romans had removed from Israel the right to capital punishment like a handful of years before. The weird thing about this is they were still allowed some leeway within Roman law, the Israelites, to handle subjects who had threatened their way of life, like threatened their religion, threatened the temple. We see that in chapter 7 of the book of Acts. They stoned Stephen to death for blasphemy. Also, we see it in Herod. He had, long after Jesus, or a little bit after Jesus had died and ascended to heaven, the brother of John, who wrote the gospel, James, was beheaded by Herod. Now, there's no repercussions from Rome on any of this because they had some legal standing. They would allow for that. But the Jews of the day, these religious elites, they wanted capital punishment executed by Rome, and they wanted him hung on the cross. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the law, verse 21-23, it says, anyone who is hung on a tree is under God's curse. So most likely, this is what the religious leaders are thinking with having Jesus hung. Look, he's cursed of God. So is everything he taught. So is everything he did. Here's the interesting thing about discerning from man's perspective and God's perspective. Excuse me. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, the Apostle Paul says this: Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree. Don't you love that? You see, the religious leaders, in their hearts of doing evil, they think they are doing away with this troublemaker who is challenging their way of life. But from God's perspective, God is going to use that very thing for good, and he is going to use it to bring salvation, to redemption to the world. We are no longer under the curse of sin because Jesus took that on himself. So friend, we have to always, when we look at what's going on in the world around us, you know, there is a lot of evil, a lot of bad things taking place. But we have to say, God, what's your perspective on this, and how do I approach it per your perspective? Okay, so moving on, it says in verse 31, Pilate said, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. Oh, forgive me, I already read that. Jump down to 33. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, are you king of the Jews? Now you have to read all four gospels to understand all the charges completely. The Jews wanted a bunch of charges against Jesus, but what finally had to happen is they had to settle on one that would hit Pilate in such a way that Pilate would be willing to accept those charges and then would be willing to execute judgment on Jesus. Okay, so they kind of settle on Jesus calling himself this king insurrectionist, which would have been normal with Jesus allowing the title of Messiah. Remember, because the Jews keep questioning him, and he'll finally say, it is as you say. You will see the Son of Man ascending down from the clouds in heaven. It's wonderful. But in the Old Testament, especially in Isaiah and then the prophet Jeremiah, Hosea touches on it in one verse. But basically, the Messiah, the Son of God, would also be the king, because God was saying, listen, he is going to come from the seed of David, and I'm going to seat him on David's throne, but it's going to be an everlasting throne. It's going to be an eternal throne. So they twist what Jesus is saying and present it to Pilate as, look, he's claiming to be king, and that means he is trying to come against Rome. So Pilate, who has to keep the interest of Rome in mind, has to question Jesus about it, find out if he really is trying to subvert the authority of Rome, okay? And so Jesus says, when Pilate asks, are you king of the Jews? Jesus says in verse 34, is this your own idea, or did others talk to you about me? See, Jesus wants to see where Pilate's heart is. Is there even an inkling of true questioning in Pilate's heart, or is he simply repeating what he's been told and he could care less? Now, Pilate responds, am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. So he's questioning, he's answering Pilate's surface level question. No, I'm not as you think, or as the charges have been brought against me. I'm not an earthly king who is going to come and try and challenge the throne of Rome. He says, in fact, but now my kingdom is from another place. And Pilate responds, you are a king then. Jesus answered, and this is the part I really want us to focus on today. You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Hallelujah. I love that. Now listen, all four Gospels let us know that Pilate actually wanted to release Jesus. He knew he was not guilty. But before you think Pilate is this great guy just misunderstood, no, he really wasn't. One of the historians of the day, Philo, he says this about Pilate's character. He was inflexible, stubborn, and cruel. He was known for bribery. He could be bought off. For violence, theft, assaults, abusive behavior, frequent executions of untried prisoners, and endless viciousness. Luke chapter 13 will tell about an incident where he had some of the Jews killed. Anyway, so Pilate isn't this great guy, but Jesus, during that questioning, is still going to find out if there is the slightest bit of wondering in Pilate's heart, and he is going to extend Pilate grace if he can. So let's look at how Jesus says that he was born and came into the world to testify the truth. What is this truth Jesus was born to testify about? Well, it comes from this word truth, comes from the Greek word aletheia, and its word is aletheia. Now, the two combined, John uses them no less than 32 times in his gospel. Because why? Sometimes truth gets very subverted by lies. But this word aletheia used in the Greek, now stick with me, it's really important we understand its usage as Jesus used it and its usage of the day so we can understand it for us today. It means truth, but not merely truth as spoken. Truth of idea, sincerity, truth in the moral sphere, divine truth revealed to man. It means reality. In fact, a deeper word study says this. In the ancient Greek culture, aletheia was synonymous for reality. It meant fact. Okay, friend, Jesus is saying, I was sent from God the Father because he is revealing himself to you through me. God was making himself known through his son. And so Jesus in John chapter 14, verse 6 can say, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now we have to understand something about what Jesus is saying. And in the Greek, there's something called a definitive or definite article. We always translate that word the. The job of the definite article is to specify the noun. In other words, when you take a Greek word, and in this case, the truth, aletheia, you're going to have a definite article. It'll be hey, it'll be because it's ha, hey, ta, depending on the word that follows. But the point is, he is saying the truth, not any truth, not any God, not any person, place, thing, concept. He is saying this one specific, I am naming the truth. I am naming the one true God. I am the one true Savior. I am bringing you one true way to life with God, everlasting life with God. And we have to pay attention to that because God truly wants us to know who he is and be able to relate to who he is. One of the most beautiful things that God has done in his self-expression is to make himself known as Father. In fact, when he leads his children, the Israelites, out of bondage in Egypt into the promised land, at least he tries with that first set of people, he calls them his firstborn son. He actually tells Moses, tell Pharaoh, let my firstborn son go that he may worship me. And that's what he wants for all of us, is to know him as Father, because God desires us to know him in this unified oneness, intimate, loving relationship. So like when he calls his children out of that bondage in Egypt into the promised land, he's actually calling them out of sin and into this new life of freedom and thriving with him. He is a good daddy. But here's the thing. Here's the application for us. We have to look at one Pilate's answer when Jesus offers him truth. Pilate's response is, what is truth? And he walks out. He doesn't wait for an answer. Pilate had the very author of life speaking directly to him. Pilate had truth incarnate, literally extending everlasting life to him. And Pilate would not listen because there was no truth in him. The cares of the world deceived him, and he cared more about this worldly life than his eternal future. Friend, if you hear the Lord calling you today, do not harden your hearts, but listen. That is my hope for you, that you will hear him speaking truth to you, because that's his desire. But too often, especially in today's day and age, we see God's truth as cumbersome, a killjoy, sucking the life out of everything we deem as good. And so we fight for those things. We desire for those things that we think will fulfill us, that we think will make us happy, regardless of how contrary they are to the truth. But here's the problem. There is one creator, and he designed us to function best a certain way. But we have told him no. We have told him, no. I know how love looks best. I know what will fulfill me, what will make me happy. And we give into those things. And we are living in a day and age where I will tell you, when we look through all out history, I think we are getting our own way more today than all of history combined. We can pretty much have anything, any way we want. And here's the funny thing. Listen to this statistic from americashealthrankings.org. You would think if we are getting our way, getting our form of truth in our lives, we'd be super abundantly happy. But it says this: nationally, the suicide rate increased 25.4%. Listen to the years, not 2020, not 2021, not even 2019. From 1999 to 2016. And in 2018, there were an estimated 1.4 million suicide attempts and more than 48,000 deaths by suicide, making it the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And before you think this is just in these recent years, Harvard Medical School did a study published back in 2011. It was basically highlighting the decades between the late 80s on through the early 2000s. And they basically said that antidepressant prescriptions increased by a rate of 400%. Friends, we have got to understand this truth, that God's ways, his truth, it is actually what brings wholeness and healing and joy and purpose to our lives, to the world around us. And not think that these are some kind of boundaries that we should view as cumbersome and hard. They are actually meant to set us free, to abound and flourish in life. So please ask yourself today, are you like the religious leaders who no amount of truth presented to them was going to have any effect? They had shut their hearts to the truth. They would not listen to a word Jesus said. They would not even look at his signs and wonders. They were closed off. Or what about Pilate? You know, for how cruel and abusive that man was, for how worldly that man was, for a brief moment in time, there was something in him as Jesus spoke that pricked his conscience to the truth. But at the end, he allowed the desires of the world beat him. And I don't know. I don't know the rest of his life. Maybe someday we'll find he yielded his life. I have no idea, but at least for here, he chose not to. So I just want to encourage you today. In our society today, truth is extremely scarce. Reality is being eradicated. We cannot say things like there are more than two genders, there are more than two sexes. No, see, God beautifully made us as male and female, two genders in his image. And he has designed a beautiful way for us to live that out. The world needs us. We need, for our own health, for our own prospering, for our own eternity, to receive his truth, the truth as revealed by Jesus Christ and in his word, and live that out in the world around us, because it is being deceived at a staggering rate. And they need the hope of the gospel. They need the truth of Jesus Christ. So please today, I just encourage you to spend time with the Lord in his word, listening to the Holy Spirit and what his truth and his love is for each and every one of us. I hope this helps you today, friend, and I'll see you in the next lesson. God bless.